Hello everybody, and welcome to your first lesson of your virtual learning week 2. So if you haven't already, go ahead and go back and watch that update video on your AP test, because I cover everything that I now know about your AP exam and give you guys some insight information. This week we are starting off with a really good lesson, just taking a look back at what is the best way and some tips to write an FRQ, which is going to be extremely important because now your AP test is 100% FRQ. Also, too, if you didn't look at your announcements, just a reminder, since you guys are A-B day, I'm not going to bog you down with new lessons every single day. So you guys are going to be getting lessons from me Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tuesdays and Thursdays are for you guys to catch up on work or just continue to review for your exam, okay? So I'll still post like assignments for Tuesday just like as a reminder, but when you open it up, it'll say, hey, just take today to catch up on whatever yesterday's lesson was or study for your AP test. Okay, so let's get started. If you feel like this PowerPoint looks familiar to you, it's because I showed it to you right before you took your first FRQ back in August, September-ish, before you took your first test. So it is the same one. Some of the stuff applies to like a normal AP test, so like 100 question or 80 multiple choice questions plus 3 FRQs. So I'll just point those out and kind of modify as we go because I just didn't go through and take every single thing out. But let's go ahead and get started. So for your free response this year in 2020, you will have 2 questions, 2 FRQs over a 45-minute period. These 2 free response questions will account for 100% of your grade. Okay, so if you watch your review video, you know that FRQ1 is weighted as 60%, FRQ2 is 40%, but your entire test, so 100%, is going to be a free response question, or 2 free response questions making up 100% of your grade. So these are the possible questions you could see: document-based, calculation-based, synthesis and evaluation, or experimental design. We know you're going to have an experimental design, okay? We also know you're going to have one where you have to analyze an environmental problem and propose a solution. I would say that definitely falls under synthesis and evaluation, or it might even be document-based. If they give you kind of some background information. So you're going to have a question on your assignment after this where it asks what kind of FRQ are you definitely going to have. The answer here is experimental design. You're definitely going to have to design an experiment, okay? This is a time allocation suggestion for a typical AP test. Yours is a little bit different. Your first FRQ is 25 minutes. Your second is 15. So this first one definitely could apply to your first FRQ, but you got to be a little bit quicker on your second one. So 3 minutes to read, consider, organize, outline, 18 minutes to actually answer, or in this case, type the question, and then 2 minutes to reread it and edit. Remember, it's broken up to where you'll have a 5-minute window to submit your FRQs once you're done, and once you submit your first one, you can't go back to it. So this one says you can go back to questions given time left. That's because in a normal like AP test setting, you guys would have your booklets in front of you, and if you had time left over, you could go back and read over it. That's not going to be the case here, okay? You're not going to be able to go back to your first FRQ and review it once you get done with your second one. So make sure your first one is done, you feel good about it before you submit it, because you can't go back. You don't get graded for outlines, pictures, or bullets. The outlines and the pictures don't really apply to you because you're not going to be like writing on actual paper to submit. It'll be online. But bullets, definitely. It would be very easy to do bullet points when you're writing an essay. They will not grade them. They have to be full sentences in essay form. Okay, so do not just answer in bullet form. Here's some general tips. So like this says write legibly. How about you just type with proper grammar? The blue or black ink doesn't apply. Avoid tree hugging. So don't go on and on about how important or lovely nature is. These are scientific questions. You need to provide scientific evidence and use specific detail. Okay, we're not writing English essays. I'm not looking for a bunch of fluff. They're not looking for fluff. They're looking for, do you understand what the science says? Make sure you understand the differences between these. So what is a social impact? So if it's a social impact, we're talking about, how is culture affected? How are social norms affected, or how do they impact the environment? Economic is going to deal with money, jobs, people. Environmental is all about the environment. We don't mention humans if it's an environmental issue, okay? Human health, we're not going to actually have one on human health because human health was a part of Unit 8. So don't have to mention unit health. And then political, you would need to mention very specific legislation. And I'm not really sure if they'll ask for any legislation on this one because legislation was kind of lumped into your very last unit, so Unit 9. So I doubt there'll be anything specific, but we'll still review stuff anyway. So here are just some general hints. So the maximum number you can get is 10 points. I'm assuming that's still the case. After you've answered all the FRQs, go back and see if you can find where your points came from. If you only get to 8 or 9, chances are you forgot to respond to some part of the question, because you got to remember, make sure you are reading these questions in their entirety and making sure you are answering every single thing that they ask for, okay? If you can't get to 10, go back and see what you missed. Make sure you show all your work on any math questions. Again, doubtful that there'll be too many calculations on this one because you won't be able to work them out. But if for some reason there is math, if you don't show your math, you won't get any credit. Make sure you guys are answering everything in its entirety. Again, this goes for a normal test day. I do get to see your test responses really quickly. So the turnaround this year is like on the dime. So I think like 2 to 3 weeks after you guys take your test, I'm going to be able to see what you wrote. So I'll definitely be taking a look at those. Use some time to brainstorm. You guys will be at home, get some scrap paper out. And then make sure you're answering everything in complete sentences, guys. You are all at least juniors or seniors. You know how to write an essay. I know you guys know how to use a complete sentence, what it looks like. Answer everything in a complete sentence, please. Do not write a giant paragraph. Even when you're typing these, label what you're on, okay? So if you're answering 1A, type a 1A and then your response, all right? Remember that the people that are going to be grading this are environmentalists. They're environmental teachers. They are all AP teachers. So go with the answer that's best for the environment unless it asks you to do otherwise. Don't answer a question vaguely, okay? So don't say, oh, it's bad for the environment or it's going to harm biodiversity. They're too vague. You have to give specific examples, okay? And don't say pollution because we all know that there are a million different types of pollution. So if you are mentioning pollution, by goodness, you have to mention the actual specific type, okay? If you're talking about how it's going to harm biodiversity, how? Specifically, what's going to happen. Talk about, impacts on population, what's going on. Show the grader that you know some science facts because you do. I taught you. I know you know science facts because you've been with me for a year and I've taught you some science facts. Define terms used. So when you write these, you guys kind of have to assume that you're the expert, okay? So you guys are the captain of this ship, so to speak. You're assuming that you're writing these essays for someone who has never, ever been in an environmental class or knows nothing about environmental science. So if you introduce like eutrophication, define it, okay? Say eutrophication common, which is yada, yada, yada. You explain it, comma, go back to, answering the question. And if you're going to use like acronyms for something, like if you were going to say carbon dioxide, which is CO2, what you have to do is you need to write it out the first time. So you would write carbon dioxide, and then in parentheses, you would write CO2 to let the reader know that CO2 is carbon dioxide. And then after that, if you're going to mention carbon dioxide again, you can just write it as CO2, but you have to define it the first time. And if you mention CO2 a second time in a different FRQ, you have to define it again. Okay, so you have to write it out the first time as carbon dioxide and then put it in parentheses again. And the reason for that is because the same person will not grade both of your FRQs. Two different people will likely grade your FRQ. So even though if you define it early on, it doesn't mean it's defined in your other essays. And again, be specific. So when we talk about air pollutants, sulfur dioxide, ozone, etc., sediments, metals, nutrients, if you know that the detail is correct, include it, okay? Be specific. If it asks you to identify, you can do it in one sentence. Again, you guys are using a sentence. So if it asks you to identify a source of air pollution, you would say one source of air pollution is, pick your poison, okay? But you still need to answer it in the sentence. When it asks you to describe, discuss, or explain, typically you need about 3 sentences, and you need to relate it back to whatever it's asking you. And then if it asks you to identify and describe, you need 4 sentences. So 1 for the identification, 3 for the description, okay? Don't skip anything. Put something down that you might think is right, because if you don't answer it, you're sure as heck getting it wrong. But, sometimes the universe smiles upon us, and we can pull something out of our brain that we think is wrong, but it's actually right. So don't skip anything. If it says to give 2 reasons and only the first 2 things you write down are graded. So same if it says 1 reason, only the first is graded. Remember, I told you guys this. If it asks for 2 things that are listed and you list 3 and the first and the third one are right, but that one in the middle is wrong, guess what? You're only getting 1 point, okay? Because they're going to stop reading after the first 2 if it only asks for 2. So choose the 2 that you think is best, or the 1 that you think is best, whatever it is they're asking you for. If it says to identify and describe 2 reasons, that means you need 4 sentences, all right? Break it down, like dumb it down. Pretend the people that you are writing to are dumbo bumbos, okay? So your first 4 sentences, the first is you identify the first one, 3 sentences to describe it. Then you identify the second and 3 sentences to describe it. Get 8 sentences all together. Write these essays. Teach these people something, all right? Don't restate the question or give an open paragraph conclusion. No, we don't want that. It's short, sweet, to the point. Include the scientific evidence. This is scientific writing. It's not fluff, right? Pace yourself. You got 25 minutes for your first one and 15 for your second, and there's not going to be anybody in that room with you telling you to check your watch, okay? So you guys are responsible enough to keep an eye on the time. I believe you can do it. When it asks for an environmental benefit or cost, you talk about animals, plants, soil, or air. You don't talk about humans. If it's asking you about environmental benefits or cost, don't mention humans. When it asks for a societal benefit, talk about people, cities, crops. How does it benefit society? Human health effects, specifically asthma, emphysema, nervous system issues like birth defects. We didn't get into human health, but we did talk about how pollutants could impact human health, so it's possible you could see that. So keep that in mind. When it asks for economic benefits or cost, money and jobs. Money and jobs. You have to talk about money. It's all about the money. If the question asks what could the government do, you answer with something about writing a law, taxes, or educating the public. So again, you're going to have an FRQ where you have to propose a solution. One of those solutions might be politically driven. Okay, so what could the government do? What could be done? Hey, you could write a law that prohibits this, or prevents this, or limits this, or taxes this behavior. Or you can have incentives for educational programs with outreach where people go and teach kids about pollution. Okay, what can the government do with all of its wealth, right, to correct whatever environmental problem you're looking at, right? Focus on that, because chances are when you have to propose a solution, it could be something in that realm. Sometimes they want you to play devil's advocate, so just make sure that you are explaining incentives and then drawbacks that are, basically if they're looking for you to play devil's advocate, you are answering in opposition to what you normally would think. So just use, again, scientific-based evidence. Make it sound good. Make it sound like you know what you're talking about, because I know you do. All right, so just keep that in mind as you move forward. And I'm about to run out of time on this video, so I'm going to cap it here and then we'll pick back up, and there'll be just probably a few minutes on a second video to watch.